Summer is cruising, and it is that time when we do our June wrap up. I can't believe that we're about halfway into summer already. It boggles the mind. So, let's tell you what I've read this past month. The first thing that I read was The Return of Ellie Black by Amiko Jean. And I picked up this book because right on the cover, Stephen King said magnetic, and the Stephen King stamp of approval calls to me. So I haven't been disappointed yet when reading a book that Stephen King has made good comments about. So even just one word, magnetic, I was like, all right, we'll check it out. This is a story about this girl who was missing for 2 years. It opens up on the book. She's running in the forest and running for her life. And she's found by these two hikers. And they're like, do you need help? Because she's all bloody. There's like vomit on her. Her hair's all matted. She looks like she's been through some crap. Then also, the detective who had been on her case, she gets a phone call. And they're like, hey, they just found Ellie Black. And she's like, holy F. Because she had been on that case. It was a lot of dead ends, and now she's back. And what's weird is Ellie doesn't really want to talk about it. Obviously, she's been through some crap and it's traumatic, so that's understandable. But it seems like she's almost protecting the people that had taken her. So it's kind of effed up. Crazy story. It's a thriller. It's fast paced, and it was absolutely fantastic. Highly enjoyed it. After that, I needed a little weirdness, so I read The UFO Singularity by Micah Hanks. And I picked up this book. It's an older book. It's from like 2012. And it's still pretty relevant today. And it's about, UFO technology, but it's also about like the UFO singularity, which is at some point, technology just hits a point where it's well above and beyond like what we humans can even fathom. As it keeps expanding so fast, what has already existed and what is coming into existence. And it's kind of a crazy book. There's all these different concepts in it. It's fascinating. And then it gets into talking about like all the technology of UFOs, where they could have come from, whether they're interdimensional from outer space, or if they've been here and they've been here all along, or some government technology and all this crazy stuff. Micah Hanks has a long history of being in the paranormal world. He has a podcast. He's written a ton of books. I will put a link down below to his podcast and his website if you want to check him out. Super interesting and weird. Bookish things and weird stuff. That's what we're all about here. All right, so after that, I read Here in Avalon by Tara Isabella Burton. I don't know if this was a fantasy. I guess it was kind of fantasy. It follows these two sisters, and one of the sisters has always been like, I wouldn't say she's always running away, but she's always chasing like the dream job, the magical love of her life, kind of out there and always looking for this magical existence. And so she would come in and out of her sister's life like all the time, very transient, be in a relationship ended, on to the next thing, da 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 da. So she comes back into her sister's life. Her sister's convinced she's not going to stay, but the other sister's like, no, this time for real. I'm sick of myself. I'm sick of who I've been. I realize there's no perfect job. There's no perfect love, all this stuff. Then she meets some people who maybe are fairies that may take her away to Avalon. Once she disappears, the other sister takes it upon herself to try and find the sister and kind of throws her whole stable life away to the wind. And it was quite a great read. It was magical and weird and whimsical and mysterious and like very heartfelt and emotional as well. I really enjoyed it. Fantastic book. I will also have links down below to all of these books if you're interested. Those are affiliate links, which is a great way to support the channel and also support indie bookstores. All right, so next up we read You Like It Darker by Stephen King, which is a collection of short stories. I thought this was absolutely fantastic. Short story books can be kind of hit or miss for me. I feel like a lot of times you get like some really good ones, and then you have some that are okay, and then some that are just eh. But I thought this one was pretty great. There was a lot of just like excellent stories in it. I really liked the first story, Two Talented Bastards, because it's a paranormal story and I love paranormal stuff. I thought Rattlesnakes was fantastic, which is a sequel to Cujo. And then I liked The Dreamers, which was like weird and kind of H.P. Lovecraftian for sure. I also liked The Answer Man. That one is super fantastic. Guy that sits on the side of the road and answers all your questions. Like, knows stuff that he couldn't possibly know. It is wild. And then my favorite story was Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream. Danny Coughlin has this dream and he finds this body in his dream. And then he can't get the dream out of his head, so then he finds it in real life, the body. Then when he reports it, the police end up thinking that he killed the person. So stuff goes south. But it's super fantastic. And it's the longest story in the book. It kept me up way too late at night. I couldn't stop reading it. And then all the other stories in there too, like even the really, really short ones, I thought they were all pretty good. So great collection. Like I said, sometimes short story books are hit or miss for me, but this year I've read 2 really great ones. This was one of them, and the other one is Never Whistle at Night, which is a collection of dark indigenous fiction. I'll put a link to that one down below as well if you want to check that out. Okay, so after that, I read The Cemetery of Untold Stories by Julia Alvarez. And this book I thought was really cool because it had kind of like a weird concept to it. It follows the story of this author, and she has several stories that she just can't seem to form them together and to put them into the words that she wants to have them be as a book. She had another friend who was an author that she's pretty sure the fact that her friend had another story that she couldn't get out or wasn't able to tell, that made her kind of go insane. So she, I think, is a little worried about this. So she ends up inheriting this property and she decides she's going to go live there, and she makes a cemetery for these untold stories, and she buries all the stories there, and she makes little like headstones and stuff for them. And it's such a strange and weird story because once they're buried, the stories start to take on a life of their own, and the characters from the stories start talking to each other. And then they also end up telling their stories to this woman, Philomena, who ends up being hired to take care of the grounds and of the cemetery for Untold Stories. And it's just a really heartfelt, beautiful book, and I really, really enjoyed it. I would highly recommend it. After that, I read a book called Bitter Water Orchestra, and that is by Nicolette Polek. It's a short little novella, and it's like a ghost story, and it's super poetic and beautiful. It follows this woman who is haunted by this other woman's ghost, and she kind of like follows in her footsteps and kind of digs into her history and sees her story. And I don't know how to fully or describe it well. It was just a lot of beauty and sadness and emotion in this short little novella, and I'd highly recommend it if you like stories of strange hauntings. After that, I read another short story collection called The Children's Horror by Patrick Barb. This collection is super cool in concept. It's basically, there is a bunch of short stories, and they're all about children's shows, but retold with like a horror edge. And you have something along the lines of like a Pokemon story, and then you have a really large dog, like Clifford the Big Red Dog and whatnot, and there's a whole bunch of them. And so you come into the book, and there's like an intro story too of these teachers that are in their classrooms when their kids start acting all weird. So the one teacher, she's like in her classroom, and the kids are all sitting in a circle and having their circle time or whatever, and they're like talking to each other, but then they get all like creepy and weird, and the vibe in the room starts to get like super not okay. And the teacher's like wondering what is going on, and then her phone rings and she picks it up. It's the other teacher from one of the other classrooms. She's like, "Hey, how are the children?" She's like, not really sure. And she's like, "Well, mine are all gone. Some are in like the heat ducts and they're skidding around in there, and the rest of them, they went who knows where. I don't really know." The other teacher like turns around, and then all her children are gone, but there's like one standing in front of her being all like creepy, but she sees like all the other children in this one kid's face, body, whatever. And she's like to the other teacher, and she's like, "Oh, mine seem to be gone too. Can you come here?" Because yeah, I'd be freaking out too. What the F? And it's super creepy, and it's a very fun and very entertaining. After that, I read the 4th book in the Dark Tower series, Wizard of Glass by Stephen King. This book was a chunk. It was like 900 pages. It is more into Roland the Gunslinger's backstory, from when he was a teenager, when he was 14, like when he left his kingdom, when all the crap started to hit the fan. Him and two of his best friends, Elaine and Cuthbert, they hit the road and they go to Magus. And there he meets the love of his life, and they're star-crossed lovers, and the tragedy that befalls them, and all the craziness. And so you're flipping between Roland's past, and you get a bit of the present with the people he's with currently, with Eddie and Susanna and Jake and Oi, and you get into this weird, like, Wizard of Oz type stuff towards the end of the story, which I thought was really cool. I have a standalone review for that. If you want more info on that book and my thoughts on that book, I'll link that down below. I could go on and on about that one, so I don't want to start talking about it and then go on for quite some time, because there's so much to unpack in that book. But I loved it. I thought it was pretty fantastic. I had a great time reading it. Looking forward to the next one, The Wolves and Calla. Gonna start that one soon. All right, so after that, wanted something cozy and rosy and nosy. So I read Garden Spells by Sarah Addison Allen, and it's just a very witchy, cozy book. Follows the story of two sisters. The one sister lives in the grandmother's old house and has stayed there and taken care of it, and her other sister kind of became like all transient and jumped around and bounced around in relationships and kind of became what their mother used to be like. And so the one sister has abandonment issues. The other sister dates really horrible men and puts herself in really horrible situations. And she ended up kind of like chained to this last one because she got pregnant. And she had tried to get away from him before, and he found her. Really horrible stuff happens. And then she's like, okay, she still is like, I can't raise a daughter in this. I have to get away. And so she hasn't wanted to return to her home because, she's trying to escape the Waverly name, trying to escape being witchy and whatnot. But she ends up going back home because she thinks that's probably the only place she's going to be safe. And so from all that trauma that she's experienced, that the sister experiences, once they're back together, they finally start to heal by increments. It's just very magical, and they heal the slow process of healing all the trauma. And as they come together and the people around them and just, trying to deal with all the brokenness of what's happened to both of them. It's a moving and sweet story, and I highly enjoyed it. How magical it was. I like that there was a sentient apple tree that throws apples at you. It's great. Alright, so after that, we read A New Couple in 5B by Lisa Unger. And this takes place in a historical old apartment building in New York. There is this couple, and they had been taking care of the husband's uncle, and the husband's uncle ends up leaving this apartment to them. It was originally supposed to go to the uncle's daughter, but they were estranged and had a really terrible relationship. So this happens. The daughter is not happy that this couple has inherited the building. And in the building, the people are very welcoming and friendly and whatnot, but it seems like there's more sinister stuff going on behind the scenes. And the building they move into has like super effed up history and background. Like the architect jumped off the roof and committed suicide. There's been a bunch of murders and other suicides, and it might be haunted. And it was a super fun thriller, and I had a lot of fun with that one. There will be a standalone review coming for that one at some point in time soon. After that, we read Down with the System by Serge Tankian, and it is a memoir of sorts. It follows his life, his family history. He talks about the Armenian genocide. All four of his grandparents had survived it, and just the family history and all the horrors and stuff that had happened there. And just, it's very tragic and moving. And, it shows his real heart and soul, because it shows you why he's an activist and why he wants to bring this to light and not have those people be forgotten. And then, you have all that, and then you get into his passion and his life as a musician, and, being in the band System of a Down, and then all the other stuff he did as well as a solo musician, playing with an orchestra, being a composer, doing stuff for film and for TV, and all of that stuff. Just a really fantastic musical memoir. One of the best I've read in quite some time. So if you're a fan of videos where I talk about multiple things that I've been reading and you haven't had a chance yet to check out the top 10 books I have read so far this year, that will be the next video coming up. So stick around, check it out. And if you had fun hanging out today, hit that subscribe button, come back, see me again, and we'll talk about more bookish things and weird stuff.